Welcome to the Good Fight of Faith series. Faith unites billions of believers across the world and history. It is one of the strongest forces in the universe. This course empowers you to fight the good fight of the faith. Kindly email info@cohcc.net to obtain a free electronic copy of the series handbook. Whether you're exploring faith, growing, or already mature in faith, this will help you take the next step. The Good Fight of Faith forms part of our Christian growth track, which equips you to find and fulfill your life purpose. To get the most out of this series, consider joining a small group at City of Hope.
Well, I've been delighted and enjoying this Good Fight of Faith series, and I trust you've also really been blessed by that. But now we want to talk about mountain moving faith, and Jesus speaks about that in Matthew 17 verse 20, where he says, "Truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." Nothing will be impossible for you. You can move mountains, Jesus says, if you've got but the size of faith of a mustard seed. Faith really unlocks the impossible. Faith enables us to do what seems impossible. And it's really when you and I become persuaded, because remember, that's the meaning of faith, to become persuaded of what God is most persuaded of. When you and I become persuaded of what God is persuaded, that it gives us that faith to really move mountains. It unlocks the impossible to us. And Katinka and I have witnessed that with the healing of my knees after 8 years of battling a knee condition. It was when I started believing what God believes, when I started believing about His love and His goodness, not in my performance, not in me ticking all of the religious boxes and jumping through a lot of hoops, but really believing what my Father believes. When I became persuaded of what He was most persuaded of, it achieved the impossible. Doctors said it's impossible to get healed, yet I got healed. And it was because when I believed what God believed. We also saw the same in acquiring a property, a house. When we moved to Alberton or Joburg South about 10 years ago, we realized that we needed a house worth 2.2 or 2 million rand to stay in a good area for our family, but we could only afford 1 million rand. We could only afford half. And so in prayer we went to the Lord and said, "Lord, can you do this? Can you give us a 2 million rand house for 1 million rand?" And God began to direct me to look at auctions and to investigate auctions. And I attended multiple, probably 20 auctions over a period of a year before we did buy a house worth 2.2 at the time. And we bought it for 1.1 million rand, literally for half price. And it's been such a great blessing to us. But it only happened when I started believing what God believed, when I became persuaded of what God was most persuaded of. You know, it was like a mountain in front of us, having the battle to find a house, to find a home for our family in a very expensive area. We couldn't afford it, but when I believed what God believed, when I became persuaded of His persuasion, faith enabled me to do the impossible, to move mountains. I had to work my faith. I had to take that mustard seed faith and really work it. I had to attend 20 odd auctions and learn and develop my skill and build my faith until that mustard seed became strong enough to move mountains. And that's what I'm going to show you today, is how to develop your mustard seed faith to move mountains and do the impossible. I'm really not sharing these testimonies to try and impress you, but I am sharing it to impress upon you that your faith, even if it's but the size of a mustard seed, can move mountains. Your faith in God can achieve the impossible if you can just work that faith and work with that. In James 1 verse 2, the writer says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, and let perseverance have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." You see, our faith gets tested. Why does our faith get tested is the question we have to ask. I believe our faith gets tested to make it substantial. We know Hebrews 11 verse 1 says, "Faith is the substance of the things we hope for." It makes our faith substantial. And if we are to move mountains, we need substantial faith. We need faith that is rock solid. And so our faith oftentimes gets tested to sort out the flakiness, because oftentimes we develop what I call flaky faith. And flaky faith is oftentimes based on assumption, and that's kind of the excess of what we experienced with the faith movement many years ago, where you had that thing that people believed, if I want something bad enough, if I confess it, if I name it, if I claim it, I will have it. And many people were disappointed and still get disappointed because of the name it and claim it gospel, if you would. But faith is not based on that kind of assumption that whatever I want, I must just name it and claim it and I will attain it. No. Faith is based on substance. It's based on God's persuasion. And that's why trials are allowed to come our way. God doesn't cause trials, but He will use those trials. He used the trial of my knees to really expose my flaky faith, because my faith said, if I believe hard enough, if I have enough faith, and if I confess all my sins, I will be healed. And then for 8 years, it didn't happen as I expected. And it was only when I really aligned my beliefs to God's beliefs, something had to be challenged in my heart. God challenged the core of my beliefs, and I shifted my faith and rested it upon a person who cannot lie and the person who promised. And it turned flaky faith into substantial faith. You see, we're not going to move mountains with flaky faith. We're not going to move mountains with presumption. We have to move mountains with faith that is substantiated by the promise keeper and His promises. You see, the SABS is a governing body in South Africa that has to approve any product that is sold, that it's up to standard, that is of good quality. And if the SABS places their stamp on a product, it means that it has passed the quality test. In the same way, our faith needs to pass the quality test. It is tested to be of substance. Wow. You see, we move mountains when our faith becomes more substantial than the mountains itself. When we become persuaded of what God is most persuaded of, the words that we begin to speak is not our own words, but it's the very words of God that carries weight, that carries substance. And that's why Jesus says, if you have faith, if like a mustard seed, you can speak to a mountain, and your very words will move the mountain from where it is. You see, when our faith becomes substantial, when we believe what God believes, our words carry the same amount of weight and authority and substance than what God's words carried when He created the universe, when He split the lights, when He split the waters, when He said, let there be light. When we begin to believe what our dad believes, when we believe what our Father believes, our words carry so much authority and substance that even mountains, problems, can be moved. You can recreate your landscape in the spirit and in relationships and in business and in finances and in your career. You can move the landscape or change the landscape and move mountains when you have faith that was tested and substantiated. And so, in a sense, He says, count it all joy. Rejoice when you face a trial, because it becomes an opportunity to make your faith substantial, to change from having flaky faith or presumptuous faith to having substantial faith, the kind of faith that will actually move mountains. Wow. You see, every problem we can face on this earth is really a wisdom problem. If we have sufficient wisdom to deal with any problem, we'll have no problems. That's why heaven doesn't have problems, only opportunities. And so we have access to that wisdom. And this test that we face, in the testing of our faith, the good news today is that it really is an open book test. It's an open book test because James writes, same James, he says in the same passage, he says, if any one of you lacks wisdom, then let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, not doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord, because he's double-minded man, unstable in all of his way. You see, the test of our faith is an open book test. That whenever you and I need faith, or we need heaven's wisdom. What is heaven's wisdom? The word Sophia in the Bible language means superior intelligence. Wisdom refers to the fact that God's wisdom, His intelligence, is superior to that of the world. That's really what faith is. Faith is to tap into the superior intel, the superior intelligence of our Father in heaven. And when we tap into His intelligence, there's no problem on earth that we cannot fix. In fact, every problem becomes an opportunity to manifest our Father's wisdom, His superior intelligence. The secret to moving mountains is really doing that, is to ask God for His superior intelligence. You know, when I went to the Lord about this house, Katinka and I prayed and we said, God, can you give us a 2 million rand for 1 million? His superior intelligence was start investigating auctions, knowing that a year later we would be able to purchase a 2.2 million rand house for 1.1 million rand. It's been such a great blessing to us. His intelligence converted our problem into a great opportunity to manifest His wisdom. And out of that was born a book called The Power to Create Wealth. It's one of our our Christian growth track modules that has blessed and touched and empowered and equipped so many other people, manifesting the wisdom of God, His superior intelligence. So we have to ask God, when we ask Him for wisdom, we have to ask Him believing that He will give generously. It says He gives generously, and He also gives without reproach or without finding fault. He's not a respecter of person. Any person who's in a situation where they need God's wisdom, His superior intelligence, by humbling yourself and saying, God, I don't know, I don't have the answer. My intelligence is inferior. My wisdom is inferior. When you turn to God with that heart of humility, God says, I will give generously, I will give without reproach. And this is the condition. He says, if you ask, you must not have a double mind. You must not have doubt in your heart, because the man who doubts is double-minded, and he should not expect to receive anything from God. I found that the worst thing I can ever do to myself and to my family is to be double-minded. Because if I'm double-minded, I can have zero expectation that God will answer my prayers, that God will release His superior intelligence. I can't be double-minded and thinking maybe man's wisdom is better, maybe human intelligence and human opinion is better than God's opinion. No, I have to be single-minded to say, God, you know best, your wisdom is better, your intelligence is superior. I must be single-minded to know that God's going to give me that wisdom. He's going to release it, and when He does, it's going to move the mountain. It's going to generate faith in my heart. It's going to move a mountain. Jesus Himself in Mark 11:22 answered them, and He says, you must have faith in God. You can also translate that as saying you must have the faith of God. You must have the God kind of faith. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for you. Faith, the God kind of faith, really authorizes us to move mountains. He said, if you have the God kind of faith, you believe what I believe, if you have my persuasions, then you can speak to the mountain. Many people pray and say, God, would you move my mountain? Would you take away my problems? No. God has given you and I the authority to move the mountains ourselves. We don't have to speak to God about the mountain. We can talk to the mountain about what God is saying about that mountain. But that requires the God kind of faith. It requires that you and I start believing what God believes most. Wow, that's amazing. The God kind of faith authorizes you and I to speak to our mountains, to address it, and actually command it to be cast into the sea. We must also remember that death and life is indeed in the power of our tongues. And we cannot speak with faith in one moment and then undermine that faith by speaking forth human opinion or human understanding and human reasoning. And so we need to clear our fountain, the fountain of our mouth, and say, Lord, we're going to resolve to speak what you speak, to believe what you believe. You see, inferior wisdom of man, human opinion, will always seek to undermine the superior intelligence of God, the wisdom of God. And so, does it mean that we need to shut off our brains, that Christians and believers are brain dead? No, it doesn't. If I look at the Bible, there's so many examples of Daniel and Joseph and King Solomon, who was wise and applied their minds to great things, but they brought their minds into submission to the superior intelligence of God. And that's really what it is. God has given you a mind, He's given me a mind, and our minds are brilliant, but our minds was never designed to be master of our life. Our minds was designed to be a servant, to be subservient to the intelligence of God that flows from the heart of God, from the mind of God. So how do we move mountains? You can pray about your mountains. You can even ask God to move your mountains, and He might move some for you. But best is if you and I get equipped through faith, the God kind of faith, the persuasions of our Father, so that you and I can speak to our mountains and direct them ourselves and declare to them that they should move. Jesus says, you will even do greater works. You will do my works, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers. You will do the works that I've done. But if you believe what I believe, you will do even greater works. You will move mountains. And so there's this massive invitation from our Lord Jesus. He's saying, would you come and believe what I believe? Because I want to release some mountain movers into the atmosphere. I want to release some mountain movers into your town and into your city, into your church, to make a difference and start moving mountains. So faith also involves works sometimes. James says, he says, faith without works is dead. And so sometimes God would give you a word. And some mountains you have to speak to, but you also need to take a shovel and start shoveling a little bit by little bit. I think of a mountain of debt. If you're overwhelmed by debt, consumer debt, maybe some bad debt, then part of the solution is that you start disciplining yourself, not to create more debt, but start paying off that debt and start paying off the highest debt. And there's ways that we can help you and assist you and equip you to do that. And second to that is we have to speak to the mountain. It doesn't help I speak to my mountain of debt and rebuke it and declare it must be cast into the sea, but I accrue more debt and I'm not disciplined in the way I live my lifestyle. So faith also needs actions. Remember, I had to go to that 20 auctions. I had to investigate. I had to equip myself. I had to train myself to align my education to what God's persuasion was. And so faith comes with works as well. We declare to the mountain he must move, but we also need to take those steps of faith. If you're battling a health mountain and you need healing in certain areas, you can declare to that mountain. You can speak to that mountain. If you've got the God kind of faith, you can declare that you are healed by the stripes of Jesus. But I also advise that you apply actions of a healthy lifestyle. Get exercise, eat healthy, sleep enough, get rest, and put action to your faith. I want to, if we can go to our groups now and just discuss some points that will just help us root and establish this mountain moving faith into our hearts and into our lives. So 3 questions. One is, what mountains are you currently facing? What are the mountains that you are battling with? Maybe it's a health mountain. Maybe it's a relational mountain. Maybe it's a financial mountain or something at your work or your business, or maybe it's depression or anxiety, something that you battle that's like a mountain in front of you. What is the mountain that you're facing? Question number 2, what is God's superior intelligence on that mountain? What could God's wisdom be on dealing with that mountain? Remember, there's no problem on earth that is a problem in heaven. There's only problems that create opportunities to manifest his wisdom. So what is his superior intel, his intelligence on your mountain? And number 3, what faithful steps can you take to move this mountain? What practical things can you start doing right now in addition to talking to this mountain? And then I want to encourage you to, in your groups, pray and begin to declare and speak to these mountains and command your mountain to be removed and cast into the sea. God bless you and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for watching The Good Fight of Faith. We trust that it will help you grow in faith. To get your free PDF copy of The Good Fight of Faith, talk to your small group leader or email info@cohcc.net. This series is followed by our Relentless Retreat, which equips you to walk in love, as well as a Holy Spirit Week, which equips you to walk in power. We encourage you to make every effort to join these.